I infected myself with parasites intentionally and it saved my life. I'm Josh Marcy and I'm part of the Worm Underground. I'm one of the first few hundred people in the world to intentionally infect themselves with parasites for the health benefits. My health problems all started when I was 16 and I got mono, and the mono just would not go away. I had it for over 6 months and I had a horrible sore throat, extreme fatigue, and all the other mono problems that come with it. And once it finally went away, I had chronic health issues. So I had all sorts of problems. I had asthma, eczema, anxiety, depression. I had really itchy skin. I had all sorts of GI issues. And then it eventually culminated in me becoming allergic to all but 6 foods and every pollen. I also had multiple chemical sensitivity. So I also reacted to any types of scents or perfumes or colognes or even exhaust from cars or diesel. So I really was a real life bubble boy. I was extremely sick, and the doctors told me they don't know why this happens to people, they don't know what's going on, but the next step was to put me on chemotherapy medication. And as somebody who was only 18 years old, just starting my life, I knew that chemotherapy medication would be a death sentence because what happens when you get on that is yes, it would kill off my immune system and maybe it would allow me to eat some more food. But what can also happen is when it kills off your immune system, then some sort of other disease can come and kill you, whether that's a virus or a bacteria or something else. So the fact that they told me they didn't know what to do and all they knew to do now was put me on chemotherapy medication, I knew I had to figure this out myself. I knew they weren't going to be the ones to help me, and Western medicine and all the doctors that had helped me up to that point, none of them were solving the root issue. All of them, what they were doing is they were giving me a medication to treat a symptom, but then when you end up on a bunch of medications, what ends up happening is you end up having side effects and all sorts of other problems like that. So I decided to take my health into my own hands and figure it out myself. And what I kept telling myself is my body was not designed to be this sick. I come from a long line of millions of years of people who made it far enough to be healthy enough to give me life. And I knew that just there was some sort of fundamental evolutionary mismatch with my body, my genetics, and the environment I was in. So that's kind of the approach I took to looking at it and trying to figure out the root of my health problems. So once I became allergic to all but 6 foods and they told me the next step was chemotherapy, I started doing a ton of research. And I was really researching the hygiene hypothesis because that hypothesis is a theory as to why in the Western world we have so many like allergies and autoimmune diseases and things like that. And it's really about an evolutionary mismatch of the fact that our bodies are used to being in environments where they're exposed to different bacteria and viruses and different things that we've eliminated from the Western world by sanitation and things like that. So that's kind of the root of what I was thinking was wrong with me. And I ended up finding this therapy called helminthic therapy. And helminthic therapy is where you intentionally infect yourself with parasites for the health benefits. And you might have not heard of this therapy before, but that's partially because it's illegal in the United States. And the United States is actually the only country where it's illegal. And, there's different people with different ideas as to why that is. But one reason I can tell you is because all of the big drug companies are working on turning these natural chemicals produced by these natural organisms into medication that they can put in a pill and give people the benefit by selling them a pill instead of letting them, engage with a natural organism and have it be part of their body. So after a lot of research, I found somebody named Garen. Garen's the first person in the Western world to actually intentionally infect himself with parasites for the health benefits. And, how did he get this idea in the first place? And it really came from medical research in animals. So, what conservationists used to do to try and save an endangered animal is we would bring it into captivity and then we would kill off all the parasites because historically in Western civilization, we've had this thought that parasites are inherently bad and dangerous for animals, and in order to save them, first we need to kill off their parasites. But what they were finding that was happening when you do that is the animals actually didn't get healthier a lot of the time by killing these parasites. It actually made the animals have other problems and get sick and have different types of like immune system issues. So what they figured out is by killing these parasites off from endangered species, they were actually driving another endangered species extinct. And that endangered species is the parasites, because parasites specifically evolve over a very long time to work specifically with a host. So the parasites that they're killing off in these endangered species are actually also endangered. So there was a big shift in thinking in conservation and understanding biology of the fact that, these parasites were there as part of a symbiotic relationship. That the animal's immune system evolved over millions of years with these parasites. And for the parasites to survive and reproduce, it's really in their best interest that their host does well. If these parasites want to continue to survive and reproduce and they need a host, then they can't be killing off all their hosts. They need to develop a symbiotic relationship. And part of what they do with the immune system is they actually calm the immune system down. So, in order for a parasite to survive in an organism, they need to prevent that animal's immune system from killing them off. So, what they do is they release chemicals that actually calm down immune systems and help regulate them. So, Garin, he thought of this from the medical research in animals and he decided to try it in humans because he was having some autoimmune issues that no doctors were able to help. The worms that I have that I infected myself with are actually from Belize. So he went to Belize and he walked around outside barefoot waiting to get an itch. And really, that's how you can know if you've gotten a parasite that goes through your skin, is because they make your skin itch. But they're microscopic, you can't see them. But he walked around outside barefoot for I think like 12 days. And then he finally got the itch and came back to the United States. And that's where my worms came from. So he did this therapy, and I think it was helping him with either eczema or psoriasis or some other sort of autoimmune skin condition that he had. And it actually had a great effect on him. It really calmed down his immune system, it calmed down his autoimmune issues, and it made him healthy. So he actually turned this therapy into a business because now that he has the worms in him, he's able to now safely reproduce them in order to provide them to other people. But as I said, this therapy is illegal in the United States. So the way it becomes legal is there's a law in this country that if you start a therapy outside of the country under the care of a foreign doctor, you're allowed to continue that therapy in the United States, even if it's illegal there, because you started the therapy under the care of a foreign doctor and you're being monitored by a foreign doctor. So, in order for me to get this therapy, I actually had to go to Tijuana. My trip there was really safe and easy, and the doctor was amazing. He was a very fascinating person. He's actually one of the first people to research how much vitamin D humans can tolerate. And this is because he's an oncologist, and there's certain types of cancer that respond to vitamin D because certain types of cancer have a vitamin D receptor. And he told me how he figured it out, which was really interesting to me. And he said he looked at the amount of vitamin D that was currently recommended at the time, just in a physical dose amount. And then he looked at the size of the human body and he said, just intuitively, the amount of vitamin D they were recommending is so small that it really can't have the desired effect on a big body. So that's kind of how he figured it out, was just through intuition. But then since he's in Mexico, it was a lot easier to test this on humans. So he's the one that figured out that humans can tolerate far more vitamin D than they really accepted at the time. So he's a really cool person that understands intuition when it comes to health and thinking different and trying to understand nature. So of course he's doing this helminthic therapy as well. So I went there and I infected myself with 25 helminths. They're Necator americanus. And like I said, they're microscopic when you get them. They just come in a liquid, you put it on a band-aid, and then you put the band-aid on your skin, and they crawl through your skin. And eventually they make their way to your small intestine. And at first, when they're in your small intestine, it's actually been proven that they're bacterial gardeners. So, what they do when they get there is they actually eat the bad bacteria and then they help create an environment that fosters the good bacteria. So, just by having them in your small intestine, it can actually change your bacterial biome, which is super cool. And then, when they take their first blood meal, once they've grown up enough, that's when the immune reaction can really start. Because what happens is your body has a type of blood cell called an eosinophil, and those blood cells are specifically designed to go after helminthic infections or other types of parasites. So once the helminths make their first blood meal, that does spike, and then it comes back down eventually. It can cause the symptom of diarrhea, but besides that, it can be pretty well tolerated in a lot of people, but everyone responds differently. And part of what happens is, the initial immune response does happen, but then the worms release chemicals to calm down your immune system so that they can survive and continue to live inside of you symbiotically. And this is the thing that's been missing in the Western world ever since we've killed off parasites are these natural chemicals that the parasites produce that help calm down and modulate our immune system. This is part of the reason why if you look at a map of the world and you look at where people are most likely to have parasites and where people are most likely to have autoimmune disease, they're basically opposites. This epidemic of autoimmune disease is specifically caused by an evolutionary mismatch of the fact that we have organisms that historically have been inside of us for millions of years that no longer are. And it creates serious problems. Everyone knows about probiotics now and the benefits of introducing good bacteria to your gut, but there's whole different life forms that are completely missing from our gut, and that's a huge part of the problem. So after I took my dose of helminths and waited to see what would happen, it was really amazing. I was really sick for really long. I had so many problems. My health was like whack-a-mole, and I was really dying. And once I got the helminths, it was a key turning point for me. I wouldn't say they fully cured me. There were other therapies I did as well with this that were also really helpful, but it was a turning point for my health. And it was a turning point for really calming down my immune system. And it was a turning point for starting to allow me to reintroduce myself to the world, not live in a house where I just have a bunch of air filters everywhere. Over time, my problems started to slowly fade away. So, what ended up happening is one of the first things that went away for me was my asthma. I no longer had asthma, I no longer had breathing problems, and it was better. Then my eczema went away. The itchy skin went away. I still had some GI issues, but I knew I had food allergies, and that's not going to be easy to get rid of. I also still had sinus issues, and those are not going to be easy to get rid of either. But just from these few positive things so quickly, I really trusted that this is the kind of therapy that can put me on the path to better health. And there's nothing in this world that's a magic bullet, but it's the kind of thing that's been missing that's allowing me to move in a positive direction now. So, with my food allergies, after I got the helminths, I had already done subcutaneous immunotherapy for my pollen allergies. And that's where they give you the injections under your skin. And they start with a very low dose of the pollen, and then they eventually build it up over time so that your body gets used to it and doesn't react anymore. But I had an anaphylactic reaction to that therapy, so I wasn't allowed to continue doing it because I could literally die if I continued doing it. So I found this other therapy called sublingual immunotherapy. And what sublingual immunotherapy is it's very similar to the allergy shots, but what it does is they put it under your tongue. And by putting the pollen or allergens under your tongue and starting at a very low dose and then building it up, what happens is you build up regulatory T cells and your immune system gets used to it and it stops reacting and learns that it's just another day where something's exposed and it's not actually a problem. So I started sublingual immunotherapy for pollen and it was definitely helpful. But the other cool thing that I found is sublingual immunotherapy for food. And there actually aren't a lot of companies or doctors that do sublingual immunotherapy for food, but I ended up getting on both. And both of these therapies were a game changer for me. And I don't know if they would have been as game changing without the helminthic therapy, but they definitely were an additive beneficial thing in this therapy. With this therapy, I ended up becoming very tolerant of pollen. I've ended up becoming very tolerant of different foods. And today, I'm tolerant of all foods. The only food I can't eat is wheat, but that's because I also have celiac. But when it comes to all the other foods that I used to react to and used to be allergic to, I can eat them all. And I came from a place where it was so extreme, where it's like my lips would always be swelling up, my tongue would swell up, my stomach would react to literally any food I ate, and it calmed all that down. My pollen allergies now are completely gone. When I go in public during pollen season, I have no idea that it's even pollen season unless somebody is telling me that they're having problems or that, their nose is running or itchy or they're having allergies. I really have zero way to tell that now unless I read the news or talk to somebody experiencing it. So what I've done here is I've really cured my food allergies, I've cured pollen allergies, I've cured multiple chemical sensitivity, I've cured asthma, I've cured eczema, and my mental health is so much better too. There's more problems that I had that I'm probably forgetting right now, but to come from a place where I was so low and so young, where the doctor was telling me we don't know what to do, we're just going to put you on chemotherapy medication, to now being healthy, like it's truly an incredible place to be. And this is why I wanted to share my story, because there are so many people in the world who suffer from these things, who the doctors, they don't treat the problem, they treat the symptoms. And I'm just here to show you my experience, to show you that if you can restore your biome, if you can restore the healthy balance in your body, that can really create health. And treating all these things with the pill you're going to take for the rest of your life is not the thing that's really going to give you a solid foundation of health. You're treating a symptom, you're not actually becoming more healthy. You're keeping a symptom under control. And that's the way our medical system does it, and that's the problem. One other therapy I did that really helped was a fecal transplant. So I knew my biome, part of the problem with when I got sick with mono and why my body couldn't fight it off is because I had been on broad spectrum antibiotics for a long time. And I was on them because of acne, and that's just the first line conventional treatment that they do. But I'm pretty sure the reason my immune system couldn't fight off mono is because I had been on so many antibiotics for so long. So what I decided to do was to restore my biome by doing a fecal transplant and trying to get some of the good bacteria and different things that had been killed off back inside my body. So you know me at this point, I'm not just going to put any fecal transplant in my body. I really had to get the good shit. So what I did is I found indigenous people who live an indigenous lifestyle in nature who are most likely to have the most historically accurate, complete biome. I didn't want an American biome in my body, even if it was a healthy American, because I'm of the opinion that all American biomes are completely separated from the historical version and from the natural version, just because of the type of world we live in and the medications we take and everything like that. So, where did I get my fecal transplant from? I actually got it from the Tarahumara tribe in Mexico. And if you've never heard of the Tarahumara tribe, they're a very cool group. They're actually superhumans. So they have a superhuman skill for running. It's a cultural thing where they run marathons regularly or even ultra marathons sometimes. And they live in canyons in Mexico, and they've done a great job of maintaining their indigenous lifestyle. A lot of indigenous people have now become more westernized or separated themselves from their traditional way of living, but the Tarahumara culturally really value maintaining their traditions and culture and food. So that's the other thing is the Tarahumara are gluten-free. So they primarily live on corn and beans, and they grow them in the canyons, and then they run up and down these canyons regularly to, just do their daily life things. So seeing friends and family, taking care of the crops, different things like that. But they also drink natural spring water, and really the best natural biome that I could find. They're really a special group, and the fact that they have such amazing endurance abilities is also really special. So basically, I found the best biome I could get, and then I put it inside me. And, I really didn't know what to expect with the fecal transplant because at this point, I wasn't really fully trying to solve an intestinal problem or solve any problem in particular. But really, what I was after is just restoring the balance in my body and getting to a healthier place. After the fecal transplant for 3 days, I felt completely euphoric. And I didn't expect to feel like this at all, but it was really interesting to me because I had suffered from a lot of mental health, depression, and anxiety, and things like that. But most of your neurotransmitters are actually made in your gut. So there's a very real possibility that part of my mental health was just from the unhealthy biome in my gut. So I thought that was really interesting. And then afterwards, I just felt less inflamed. I felt like my everything in my body kind of calmed down a little bit. And I just felt overall healthier, more balanced. And since then, I've had zero large intestine issues. Um, my large intestine has been great ever since then, and it really did do something. So that was another special part of my journey that really got me to this healthy place. So these things I've done, they're not for everyone. And that's the thing is helminthic therapy is technically illegal in the United States. To do a fecal transplant in the United States, really it's only legal for people with C. diff infections. There's ways to try and get it, there's ways to get exceptions, but for C. diff, it's a bacterial infection that's resistant to all antibiotics, and you have a good chance of dying from that if you don't do a fecal transplant. So that's the reason they allow it for that. But still, even when you do that, it's usually from an American. And, if you're in an unhealthy place and the best source you can get is a healthy American, there's a good chance that that can be a good thing for you. But it's really hard to restore biome balance in a world where we've just become so separated from nature, and we've taken so many medications and done so many things that have completely altered our natural biome and separated us from the natural world. So the world is starting to learn about the importance of symbiotic relationships and how these things work and how everything works together. But still, it's very uncommon, and Western medicine doesn't focus on it. And like I mentioned, they're trying to turn the chemicals that the parasites create into pills, but you can't beat nature. No pill is going to be able to do the same thing and the same number of things as a natural living organism that has existed with us for millions of years. But the problem with that is you can't patent a living organism. You can't patent a natural biome that somebody is donating. So these therapies, you can't really capitalize on them. You can't make a lot of money on them in the US healthcare system. And that's why they haven't been focused on. That's why they don't get studied. But that's part of the whole problem with this world and with our system is we have separated ourselves too far from nature. So always try and look at things from an evolutionary perspective. Always try and look at things from the perspective of, you know, yes, I'm unhealthy, but is this environment healthy for me? How can I make this environment healthier for me? There's so many ways to do that. There's so many ways to think about it, but doctors aren't going to tell you that, and they're not going to think about it that way. I really hope that sharing this story helps somebody, even if it's just one person. I really hope that this story can give people hope that there is a chance out there that they can get better. All of these diseases that doctors say are incurable, all of these diseases you might be taking medications for that are giving you bad side effects. There are other options. There are ways to get healthy. You don't have to take chemotherapy medication if you become allergic to everything. There are other options. And yes, you will probably have to leave the country to get access to these options because people like us are discriminated against in this medical system. But it's important to know about, it's important to share, and it's important to start talking about. Parasites, they've been given such a bad rap. They've been treated as villains in Western civilization and Western literature, and they're not. They're extremely important. They're symbiotic, and we need to make sure that they don't go extinct. We need to make sure that we ensure the genetic diversity of all of the different human parasites that have existed with us for so long. A lot of the parasites that you hear of that cause the worst problems in people, like you hear of a parasite migrating to somebody's brain and them dying from it or something, well, those parasites were actually evolved for other species. And that's part of the reason they cause such a problem in humans. There's parasites that come from a snail or come from a different type of mammal that are specifically evolved for those animals and that life cycle. And when they get into a human, they don't know what to do, they don't know where to go, and that's what causes a lot of these really big problems. Another thing that can cause big problems with parasites is just a high infection load. So there are plenty of parasites that can have a beneficial effect on people, but if you get infected with too many, then that can cause a problem. But with the beneficial medical parasites that I use, there really isn't a risk of getting an infection that becomes too many, because as long as you use a toilet, their life cycle takes part out of the human body. So as long as you're using a toilet, there's zero risk of you reinfecting yourself or anyone else, because it's simply just not possible. And that keeps you safe. It keeps the number in your biome balanced, and it makes sure that you don't get to the place of somebody that gets a heavy load and gets additional health problems from that. Because it's like anything, even too much of a probiotic can be bad. So it's important to maintain a proper balance of these things in the body. But when you have zero parasites, there's actually no balance there, and you're missing a whole life form that historically has been with our ancestors for millions of years. And that is a core root of so many of these problems that we have in our world. I really hope you learned something. If you have any questions, comment down below, or I'm happy to answer more in the DMs. If you're interested in learning more about this therapy, I recommend going to helminthichtherapywiki.org. It's an amazing website run by very smart and talented people who have also done this therapy and are working together to share it with the world. I hope this changed your view a little bit, and I hope this helps just one person. That's my goal with all of this, is if telling my story can help even one person in this world, then it's worth it. And I want to give people hope that, no matter what you're struggling with, no matter what you're dealing with, if you have people in authority over you who you feel are putting you on a bad path, you don't always need to listen to them. Sometimes the only person in this world who's going to figure things out for you is yourself. Sometimes the only person in this world who's going to advocate for you is yourself. And sometimes it's the right thing to not blindly listen to and trust authority. Authority can misguide us, authority can lead us down the wrong path. And it's important to always use your mind, research things yourself, learn about things yourself, think about things yourself. Doctors are smart. They've obviously proven that with being able to get into medical school and study for so long. But so many doctors are still uneducated about so many things. And that's why it's up to us, the people on the internet, to really figure these things out and research it. And you should never be ashamed to research your own condition and discuss what you found through your research with your doctor. There are plenty of doctors who don't want to hear the things from their patients that they found online or the things that they learned about their illness. But when you have a rare disease, that's what you have to do. You have to educate your doctor. You need to work with them as a team. It's not just them dictating to you or putting you on a path. It's a team where you work together, because no doctor is going to care more about your health than you do. And that's just the fact. That's the end of the story. And the only person in this world who's really going to advocate for you and figure that out is you. If you've been sick for a long time and the doctors aren't helping, that's part of the problem. Is you need to take your health into your own hands, because the doctors, they do their best, but they see so many patients every day. So many patients have an extensive health history, and it's really impossible for a doctor to really fully digest and process somebody's history and fully know where they're coming from in any appointment. So that's why it's up to you. So I really hope this video helps somebody. I really hope that you learned something, and I hope that this therapy can be legalized in the United States soon. Um, it's a game changer. It's something very special, but it's not a moneymaker for them, and it's not a moneymaker for the medical industry, and it never will be unless they can turn these medications into drugs. So The world runs on money, and that's what they're focused on right now. But if enough people become aware of this therapy, if we have enough success stories, then maybe we can do more to bringing this therapy to the United States and the world and really help people all over live in a more natural way, live in a way like our ancestors did, live in a way that our bodies were evolved for. Because the world we live in, we were not designed for. And we need to make the world we live in more designed for us.